for management students, both, it's a very challenging task. It's a very innovative task, and it needs all the drive and the initiative by all B schools to ensure that we come up to the expectations of our new education policy. Let me start by saying that quality in higher education is multifaceted and it is complex. But at the end of the day, the quality of an education program will be measured by what our students have learned. What is the takeaway for our students? And in order to ensure this, we need to go a little more backward and forward in terms of our curriculum. The NEP, which is like a focus area for discussion, it's like a great vision, and it's come at a very appropriate time. The policy is very creative, and I'm sure you would have also read about it. The fact that the focus of the policy is on primary education, and that's how we are going to ensure that we carry that forward in terms of a higher education. Let me first start by giving a little overview of the management education and the curriculum designing. But more than anything, what interested me, when I was told that I have to speak on structuring curriculum and design in management. The word design is very interesting. In fact, I have been emphasizing the design aspect of management in a lot of other lectures which I have been delivering. Because earlier, the whole philosophy of design was thought to be, a manufacturing focus. But now, not necessarily after COVID, but I would say after 2010 and the global financial crisis, the design aspect in management has been emphasized and overemphasized. In fact, if you read a lot of good articles, they talk about design thinking. And design thinking is an approach, you could say, to education, to curriculum, which is solution focused, and not problem focused. Now, that is where I would also like to take my cue for designing curriculum in management. You need to look at what our students are interested in. And more than that, what are the market demands? And once we align ourselves to the market, I think that's where, we could reach the right balance in curriculum designing. A lot of times there are questions which are asked which say, how often do we revise our curriculum? I would say revising it every year is not a good initiative. So you need to revise it, give it a little break of 2-3 years, and then, start the process. I'm not suggesting or saying that don't relook. The relook can happen every year. But the curriculum part, when you devote a lot of time and design it and, frame it, then we need to experiment and see how the whole curriculum is going ahead. There are two aspects of the curriculum we need to look at: learning objectives and learning outcomes. The good part is this keeps both the students and the faculty at the right track. So the students know that these are the objectives and this is the outcome. And this is how, the faculty also look at this, this whole design, the outcome is what needs to help us in learning about the construction of the course design. Let me start by saying that well constructed learning outcome are an essential component of the course design. And what should the outcomes emphasize? On a very, very generic note, all outcomes need to emphasize the development of our students, their abilities, their attributes, their knowledge, and at the end, you know, what kind of purpose and what kind of expectations do we have from them? Because it is this good learning outcome which will translate into the right balance and the right application and integration of knowledge. The whole issue here is that when you are looking at the designing part, we will look at how, I should say, students will articulate these concepts, where all these concepts will be applied, and all this will be a specific focus in our learning outcome. Okay. Let me add a point or two on this learning outcome, because learning outcome is what will help both our students and other faculty to make the right judgments. How do we, how do we move towards this path? How do we move towards having the right curriculum in management? So there are two, I would say, prerequisites. And what would these prerequisites be? You innovate and you do a design thinking. Innovate in terms of, it's a commonly used term, so we all need to understand. And innovate in terms of the scenario. Let me mention one important dimension even before I go into the innovate and the design thinking part of the curriculum design. The fact is that business problems in today's context are rarely unidirectional. So if you look at business problems today, they will be complex. And when I say complex, I'm not implying complex in terms of something which cannot be solved, but complex in terms of drawing from different disciplines. Now, what does that mean? What this means is that business problems which organizations have been facing more so in the last few years are problems which need a flavor of marketing, which need a flavor of HR, which need a flavor of finance, and maybe supply chain, and other important areas of management and both organization. So if business problems are not unidirectional, then how can our teaching and course design be unidirectional? So keeping this in perspective, our focus when we look at designing the management curriculum has to be cross-functional. And let me also say, in fact, let me use two words here. It should be cross-functional and it should be multidisciplinary. And if I were to use another word, it should be holistic. And, we are borrowing these words also from NEP 2020, because NEP 2020 also talks of curriculum being multidisciplinary, multi-focus, what I said, holistic. Now, this, I would say, is a key takeaway of my lecture today. And with this, I would say a little, a backdrop. This is what will help us understanding how to, look at newer perspectives when we are designing the curriculum. Uh, Let me talk a little about design thinking, which is another concept which, not emphasized by NEP, but it is something which the management graduates and the management faculty need to completely appreciate. Design thinking, as I just started with, is a thinking approach which is solution based to solving problems. So we start from the end. We start by saying, okay, this is a problem, but what is the solution? And then you try and work backwards. So let me say, a design mindset is not problem focused. It is focused on solution, which says it is focused on an action oriented approach. And if we were to relate design thinking to what I just said about cross functional thinking, this is what will ultimately help our students when they join the organization tackle complex problems which are ill-defined or unknown. Please remember that our teaching to our students cannot always be a QED kind of an approach that this is the right solution. No, a lot of times the problems which business face, and what better example than the kind of an event which we are witnessing now, the solution is not known. We really don't know when we get over this scenario in the next 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. As of now, we can still do a little more, projection. But the point is that when problems in organizations are not defined well, they are complex problems, we need to tune our mindset of our students in this direction. Let me give you an example here. I'm sure we all appreciate and we all understand the global financial crisis. Now, after the global financial crisis, the immediate impact was a little more on the B schools, apart from a general, economic impact. What was the impact on the B schools? The impact was that our students were not employable. The companies, organizations were facing problems. But more than that, it was found that there was a mismatch in the requirements of our students and what the corporates wanted. There were a lot of introspection, there were a lot of learnings, and ultimately we found that, most of the B schools were not helping the students do a scenario analysis. We were focusing a lot on quantitative modeling. The qualitative part of the thinking was missing. So, uh, a lot of refocus. In fact, I do remember here, there was this discussion discussion by various B schools in the US also. And, when you talk of B schools in the US, you talk of a Wharton and a Stanford and a Harvard with a lot of respect. And there was this seminar at the Wharton Business Schools wherein they did a lot of introspection and they realized what is wrong that our students are not employable. And it was found that it was the scenario analysis thinking, the strategic part of the thinking, which meant that you have a problem, think of a solution in alternative ways. And that is how, the innovation in the content happened. I can give another example here. After this whole process, in fact, if I could name an event in the Enron crisis after 2001, and the kind of compliances which came out, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act and other compliances, what has happened after that? Look at the way we are emphasizing ethical dimensions in a business. Again, after 2010, it was again brought to the focus. So ethics, the human aspect, And let me just put it very clearly that after the present scenario, what becomes more relevant, any other issue now, is the human aspect of the various revisions we take. So how do we bring in the human perspective? How do we bring in the behavioral perspective? And that has to be a basic perspective to the kind of strategy we formulate, to the kind of innovation we do in our curriculum. So what does this mean? Culture, the culture of an organization, the culture of a B school needs to get reflected in its curriculum. And that is something which will demonstrate both to corporates and to our students that there is a direct connection between the content which we are helping our students learn and the world beyond the B school. So the world beyond the B school in terms of the real world. Uh, so this is one part. Okay. So culture, design mindset, and now related to all this is something which we have emphasized earlier, we have talked about, is how do we include the critical thinking component into our into our design, into our curriculum. So that is, again, I would also say, central to any curriculum you design. So for any course, uh, you need to throw in that critical thinking part. Let me also give you another example here. Finance, which is my discipline, is supposed to be a very quantitative discipline. It's supposed to be numbers. Yes, there is a lot of focus on numbers, but all of us have reoriented ourselves, let me put it like this. We have realigned our teaching also to the market scenario. So we have thrown in a lot of behavioral part. I'm not really talking of just the behavioral finance paper which we talk about. There's a lot of behavioral dimensions we throw in into a completely quantitative paper which we teach. And this has been a learning, as I said earlier, from the global financial crisis. That has helped us to incorporate an experiential form of learning, which has helped us to change our curriculum accordingly. Okay. So, uh, the designing part in terms of our curriculum needs to include a lot of multiple cutting edge technologies. It needs to also include, so when you're talking of curriculum revision, let me upfront say that today, if a B school cannot tell its students that disruption is normal. So remember, we keep hearing what is the new normal. Disruption is a new normal. And we need to plan for events like a normal disruption. Okay? And that is what will be, which would help, let me say, help in the structuring of the curriculum, structuring of the design part at, for any B school. I'll talk a little more about, how this can be aligned, let me say, to the new education. But before that, let me also uh, emphasize one other important, let me say, something which we as faculty need to keep in mind. An important dimension when we are looking at any course content. Let me not say after every session, though typically we could say after every session, but when we are thinking at a broader level, when you are looking in terms of the whole course of a particular, of a particular paper. And when you are dividing it into sessions, please ensure that at least after every block, that block could be 2, could be 3, at the end of every block of a session, you should have, what they typically say, a 3-2-1 plan. So, you know, let me give an example of, let's say, if I'm talking of international finance, or let's say I'm talking of banking, and I'm teaching, a part on, let's say, how to determine how the banks are functioning. Then after a session, which could be 2 hours or 3 hours, let us have a 3-2-1 session plan. Now, what is this 3-2-1 session plan? The first part is, how have we kept our students engaged? That is one. And how have we kept the students participated? So what are the ways in which we are helping them to participate in the session? The second part of our plan. The second part of our plan is, how does my lecture help in the students connecting with a real life scenario? That is the second part. And the 3-2-1. So the one part of the plan is how it helps the faculty in improving itself. So the faculty improvement part of the plan is also what you need to emphasize. So I would say that after every session, let us have a 3-2-1 plan, which helps us in looking at our delivery from all dimensions: student engagement, student participation, connect with real life scenario, and faculty improvement. That is what helps each one of us to reach the next level. Uh, Another important dimension which we do need to take into account when you talk of structuring or restructuring the course content is, it's not the content which I am changing. Okay, so I was teaching X, I've added that X plus delta. So that is one part of it. But that delta should also take into account how I, as a faculty, have improved, or how we as faculty have improved our teaching style, teaching pedagogy, the delivery, etc. So uh, it's not just about the changing of the course content, no. And let me be a little upfront here. In spite of its widespread use, the PPT, I am one person who always says the use of PPT should be kept to a minimum. It should be a facilitative tool. It should not overtake me as a speaker. If I'm going to put the PPT, yes, all of us use the PPT, which is fair enough. But the PPT should not overtake my teaching. So it should not be such that the students, instead of listening to me, are listening to the PPT and say, okay, when she finishes off, we are just going to get the PPT and that's the end of it. No, the PPT should be only a facilitative tool. It should not overtake the faculty as such. And that is another dimension I would like to emphasize here, that, we as faculty also need to constantly innovate, because the generation we are teaching are Gen Z. And where have these Gen Z grown? They have grown in a completely different environment. They have grown up in a truly globalized world. And unless there is that something extra we impart to this Gen Z, they will not be interested in our teaching. So the challenge is how to keep them gamefully occupied all the time. All the time. And, the present crisis is completely a time to reassess business curriculum, and a little more specific if I were to add here, we should or we need to add, or I should say we need to focus a lot more on regulation and risk management. So let me emphasize 3 points here when you are going to relook at your course content, which is more generic. Focus on the regulatory part. When I say regulatory, I'm also implying compliances. So regulation and compliances have become an absolute necessity. Focus on risk management. Now, what is risk management? Risk management is completely about disruptions. So what are these disruptions? They increase the level of risk. And in fact, I'm not going to focus a lot more here, but in the last 4 or 5 years, the focus on risk management has increased manyfold. In fact, there's a concept called enterprise risk management, which talks of risk not being negative. Otherwise, when I say risk, uncertainty, everybody says, no, it's a very negative term. No, risk is not negative. In fact, the enterprise risk management concept talks of looking at risk from a holistic perspective, not from a silo perspective. So this is what I mean here when, so that's the concept I'm trying to borrow. So when you are looking at re-looking or reassessing your curriculum, don't put the marketing team separately, the finance team and the OR and everybody separate. No, the supply chain. The supply chain very much impacts marketing, very much impacts finance, and could very much impact the human resources also. So as far as possible, okay, I mean, they are going to sit separately and prepare their curriculum, but I would say somewhere, like a business strategy paper, somebody has to look at, the holistic perspective of the curriculum we are designing in terms of different disciplines we have. And then at the end, the, the curriculum we design has to be aligned with the best business practices. Remember, as a B school, you cannot remain in your own domain. You talk of industry interaction, you talk of case studies, you talk of project-based learning. So I'm not emphasizing those. I'm sure each one of us knows that. The real life scenario, all these are there. I mean, we have learned to imbibe them in our teaching. So whether it's a case study or a real life or project based, and we're all there and we know that this is something we need to do. But aligning with, let me say, with the best business practices, that is again something which you need to look at. So you look at each course and say, how does this align with best business practices? Some courses are very traditional, so it may not be possible for them. But the idea is as far as possible. Now, there are 2 questions let me pose here. There are questions always asked. Who should participate in this course revision exercise, in this course review and design? And then, as I said earlier, how often should your courses be designed? For how often, I am still of the opinion that not earlier than 3 to 4 years, because otherwise it means that our designing has not been proper. Addition can be there, updation, upgradation can be there, but not so frequently. The other question which I have raised is, should students participate in the course design? We all do invite industry, experts, but I would say students need to participate in the course review part. Even if you can't have them formally here, please ensure that at least you take inputs from the students. I'm sure there has to be a lot of screening, but yes, the students need to give their inputs in terms of the whole review process. And then I don't need to elaborate on the format which has been given to us, a structured format wherein you give a detailed session plan and what projects and books, etc., which you need to do. sorry, I'll need to close a little early because of a meeting which I have to rush. But before I close, let me talk a little about the new education policy and how this needs to be taken into account, in this whole course review and design process. And even at the risk of repetition, I'm again saying business problems are rarely unidirectional. So our curriculum also has to be cross-functional, multidisciplinary. And I'm sure, we all have read about how, you have to have an integrated teaching, wherein if I'm a science student, I need to learn about other disciplines. Could be sports, could be entertainment, could be other disciplines. But uh, it is being said that this is the best time for B schools and universities to create curriculum around the challenges being faced. And all successful universities or B schools are those that listen to the market and its problems. And what are the problems? You see, a lot of problems could be like environment, global warming, transportation, pollution, sustainability. I'm sure all these are words, which are emphasized. And if you go back a little, and when you talk of successful universities like a Harvard or in Oxford, or what comes to my mind is like a Stanford, yeah, all of them, you know, got their name and fame when they became independent. And when government also gave them a free hand. So our B schools have a lot of free hand here. So let us learn from, all these changes. And what better time than what we are in as of now. Our economy. So there will be many challenges here. The challenges will be how to reorient the faculty also, because a lot of time, let me say, even a lot of us from the old school of thought come up with a very traditional thinking. We are not tuned to think cross-functional, transdisciplinary. Now, all that, we need to uh, put in our content. And before I close, one more line. Whatever way you design your course content, whatever way you design your syllabus, please ensure there is no rote learning in that. Because if you have read about the NEP, they have also uh, focused on no rote learning in the content. I'm sorry I have to close a little early, but thank you for giving me this opportunity. Much appreciated. And I do look for uh, interactions with your B school and your university in future. Thank you so much for the effort. And uh, good wishes and good luck to each one of you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. And I have a question, sir, whether we want to incorporate any case study methods.
Yeah, absolutely. Case study methods, I didn't emphasize because I thought this is something we do in any case. But yes, uh, I have also been to the Harvard Business School and their case study learning. So there we have learned a lot. And if I'm emphasizing case study, let me say, and that was my learning at Harvard, that you know, even at that time, way back in 2010, when we had gone, their case studies were cross functional. Like if I'm a finance person, but we were about 120 participants there. You can't have a finance or a typical marketing, you can still have a marketing case study. So the case studies used to be a little more finance oriented or marketing, but it had a lot of behavioral dimension to it. And we could all understand the case studies. So I would say case studies in today's context, definitely, but then, how do you write a case study? How do you handle a case study? And how it has to be multi-focus. I think that is what we need to emphasize. And more than case studies, I'm someone who emphasizes a little more on caselets, because caselets help us in understanding the problem in the class itself. And what I mean by a caselet is a small scenario analysis, rather than having 6, 7 pages, which, I mean, as faculty, we all understand that students rarely read it up and down. That's my take on that. Yeah.
Okay.